All right, here we go. Thank you everybody for joining us today. Welcome to the CodeHS Fall Webinar Series. This is the final webinar in the second series called Becoming an Expert User. This webinar is for teachers who have been using the platform for a year or so and want to know all about the expert tools and resources to become a power user. We're going to cover some of the more advanced tools and the tools that have kind of some tricky stuff or nuance about them. And we do have webinars that will help teachers who are just getting started. So if you're hearing subjects that we're talking about and it's a bit too much for you and you'd like to focus on kind of simpler stuff like how do I enroll my students, where do I do grading, and we have a great series of webinars that are available, will be emailed out, and that you can use to get that information. So my name is Will McCambly. I'm an account manager here at CodeHS, and I'm located in Vancouver, Washington. As an account manager, my job is to be an expert for teachers and admins about all things CodeHS, whether that's planning a pathway, the site itself, or tricky programming questions. We're joined today by my colleague Alex, who's also an account manager. Alex, do you want to hop in and introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Like Will said, my name is Alex. I'm also an account manager at CodeHS. I'll be handling the Q&A for today and just helping out with any general logistics that Will needs for the rest of the webinar.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Alex. And just so everybody knows kind of how the flow of things will go today, we have a few topics, or 4 topics we're going to cover using the sandbox, highlighting student work, CodeHS Create, and academic integrity. After each section, we're going to pause to field some questions. So they don't necessarily have to be related to the bullet point that we're currently on. So whenever you think of something, just go ahead and write it in the Q&A. So we'll dive right into it. The first thing we're going to talk about today is the CodeHS Sandbox. And we're going to look at 2 specific parts of it. The homepage sandbox exercise and the class sandbox. So these are some kind of more niche features of the CodeHS Sandbox. At a very high level, what the CodeHS Sandbox is a place for students to do blank slate coding exercises. So when they're working through the curriculum on CodeHS, the coding environment that students are in is often there's a question at the heart of it. So we're trying to solve a problem, whether that's have Carol clean up all the balls or create a snowman with a graphics library. We've got a challenge that we need to solve. And the sandbox is just a place for students to code without the constraints of those challenges. So here I am in my CodeHS Sandbox, and I can get here anytime by clicking on the sandbox button on the upper left-hand side of my screen. That will always be there no matter where I'm at on CodeHS. And so to create a new program, you can name it and then click Create Program, and you're going to be able to choose from any of the programming languages and editor types that we offer. So this is a bit more basic of a feature of the sandbox, just creating exercises or coding environments in various coding languages for students to use. So we're going to take a look at this. This is the codehs.me homepage. So this is a project that came from the AP Computer Science Principles course. When students are working on that course, they're required to create some projects for AP tasks. And we decided that we'd like to have one of those projects be a website that's hosted on CodeHS. And then very recently, we opened this functionality up to all students on the site. So everybody on CodeHS has this codehs.me homepage, regardless of what class they're taking. And so what this homepage is it's an exercise, it's an HTML exercise like any other that they'd create in the sandbox, but it lives at a link on codehs.me. So for example, mine lives at willmcc.codehs.me. So let's open this up and see what it looks like. So when we click on the button, it's going to take us to the CodeHS editor that we're used to. I've got my HTML code here, and when I hit run code, I'm going to be able to see the editor output, which is just going to be some HTML. So I can also see here I've got a link, willmcc.codehs.me. And so let's try visiting that just to see what happens. And so when we visit that, we're going to see that rendered editor output, but at a website. So this is public facing. Anybody can access this. It's a really cool way for students to start to build things that they can show off, whether that's a portfolio, and maybe they've created a game with the JavaScript graphics library and they'd like to host that game here so that other students can access and play that game. Maybe they're applying to jobs or colleges and they'd like to just kind of show off a portfolio of work that they've done or create a resume. So this is a really cool tool that every student on CodeHS can use. And one quick note about it, this Will MCC, that is my username. So the formula for this URL is username.codehs.me. And so here's the important note. When students sign up for CodeHS, their username defaults to their email address. Email addresses have the @ sign in them, which is not a valid URL character. So students need to change their username before they can use this functionality. And they can do that by going to their account settings up here on the right-hand side. And so I did just want to demonstrate really quickly how we can update this. So let's go ahead and say, let's change this to just say, hello world. This is our web page. And so now when we open up this willmcc.codehs.me, it's going to show us our updated text. So this website is live with whatever the student puts in the CodeHS editor. So it's a really great way for students to just start making things that they can show to the world immediately. And so here we just have, again, some graphics about how we accessed that. There's the big green button on our sandbox. We can use username.codehs.me to access it. And so we're going to move on now to the next feature of the CodeHS Sandbox that we wanted to talk about, which is the class sandbox. So the class sandbox is basically just a collection of all of the sandbox exercises for students in a class. So there are a couple of reasons you might want to use this. You might just kind of want to peruse what your students are doing. If you've made it known to them that they can use the sandbox to do extracurricular stuff or just kind of creative and fun stuff, then it might be of interest to you to just keep an eye on that. Some teachers also like to use the sandbox as a very, very informal way to give students assignments. So I might say to my group of kids, head to the CodeHS editor, go to the sandbox, and recreate your favorite 80s arcade game. Just a challenge of that nature. And then I can go to my class sandbox and just easily see all the sandbox exercises for the students in that class. So there are a couple ways to access it. And we'll take a look at them here. So the first is going to be from my sandbox. I can just click into my sandbox. And since I'm a teacher, I'm going to have a drop down here to access my class sandbox. And so let's go ahead and click on a class here. Let's click Portland PD Workshop. I think I have an example brought up as well. Here we go. So this is one of the, we're going to have to look at a different class here. So this is the sandbox programs for the Portland PD Workshop class. Here I've got all the exercises by the students in that class, as well as my programs. So all I did to access that was use this drop down here and select the appropriate class. Let's go ahead and look at another way to access that, which is going to be to go to My Sections and then open up the section that you're interested in looking at. And so now that we've got this section open, we have our tabs that we can use to navigate. I'm going to select the More tab and then go to Class Sandbox. And it's going to bring me to the same page where I can see all of the sandbox exercises for all the students in that class. So it's a really great way to get some visibility into the type of creative work that your students are doing. Do we have any questions so far about the CodeHS Sandbox, the students' homepage in the sandbox, or the class sandbox? All right, we're going to go ahead and move right on to our next section, which is highlighting student work. So we're going to talk about 3 different aspects of highlighting student work today: badges, sharing programs, and the student program showcase. Badges are likely something you're familiar with if you've looked at CodeHS before. As students work through the site, they can earn some preset badges, things like the Carroll badge, the Carroll Challenges badge, badges that are tied with a specific piece of curriculum, and that kids can unlock just by completing it. In addition to that, you have the ability to create and assign your own badges to students. So these are a little different. These badges won't be awarded by them completing a piece of content or doing some work on the site. These are just things that you give to students. So some cool uses that we've seen for these are kind of end of year superlatives. So a fun thing to do can be to pick a superlative for each student and give them a badge based on that superlative. Additionally, you might have badges for certain challenges that you create in the CodeHS Create tool or the CodeHS Sandbox for your students to do. And when students complete them, you can award the badges. So how do we use badges? And we're actually going to dive into a class and look at this in a moment. But basically, we can award badges by clicking on the badge icon from our roster page. So from any roster page that we're looking at for our students, we can go ahead and click on the award badge, and it's going to take us to our badge interface. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the CodeHS team class here so that we can give Alex a badge for being my helper on the webinar today, just so we can watch this in action. So I've navigated to the badge page for the CodeHS team class. I just had this open from earlier and I refreshed it. I didn't do anything tricky there. So let's look at the process of creating a badge and then assigning a badge. So to create a badge, I've got a nice button here that says create a badge. And let me show that again because I accidentally clicked on something else. To create a badge, I'm just going to click here on my create a badge button. And then I can pick an image, I can give it a name, and I can give it a description. So we can see some badges that I've already made: the Great Job badge, the Wizard badge, and then there's the Alex is a Wizard badge. Thanks for the help on the webinar. And it looks like I've given Alex a number of badges already, but he deserves another. So let's go ahead and give him the Wizard badge. And now when Alex logs in, he's going to be able to see that I've given him that badge. And he might want to come talk to me about it or see what it's all about, or just feel good that he got recognized for the work that he's doing. So nice job, Alex. So again, just looking at the process for creating badges here. And so the next thing that we're going to look at for recognizing student work is sharing student programs. So for every exercise that a student does on CodeHS, they can create a publicly facing representation of it that just basically shows the program running. And it's really clean, it looks really nice, and it's a great way for students to, again, it's kind of like the homepage in that it's a thing that students can share and show off. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to go ahead and open up an exercise here of mine. And this is Super Cleanup Carroll. It's something a lot of you are probably familiar with. It's one of my favorite exercises on the site. And I know that personally, it was really tough for me to solve at first. And when I finished it, I wanted to show everybody. I wanted to say, hey, look at this dog cleaning up all these tennis balls. I didn't know I could do this. And so let's look at how that might work. So we're doing this on a Carroll exercise, but you could do this on Tracy the Turtle. You could do it on Python console, Java console, JavaScript console, JavaScript graphics, HTML, virtual reality, SQL, really anything. You can share all of your exercises on CodeHS. And so how are we going to do that? Well, here we are in the editor. It should look familiar to you. I've got my text editing pane in the middle, my exercise description on the left, and then on the right-hand side, I've got my run code pane. I've also got grading, the exercise description, docs, help, and then finally this one, more. So what we're going to do is go ahead and click on more and then share. And it's going to give me this nice little interface. So if I click on this URL, it's going to give me It's going to open up the shared version of my program. And then as the owner of the program, I have control over whether or not people can see it. So maybe I'm working on something fun that's a surprise for somebody's birthday, so I want to keep it inactive until I show it to them. Or maybe I have all my friends playing a game that I've shared with them on CodeHS, and I want to make a big update, so I take it down overnight so I can fix it. But let's take a look at what that looks like. So this is what we're going to see here when we share our program. We've just got the name of the program. Oh, I navigated away from it. Sorry, everybody. All right, great. So we're going to have the name of the program up top here. This is my name so that people who come to it know who made it. And then I've got just everything from my run code pane. So I can run it, I can change the execution speed, and we can watch it. So this is something I could send to my friends, my parents. I could send it to other teachers who I might be interested in showing my programming work. It's just a way for students to recognize themselves and show off the work that they've done. And one important note, when a student is sharing something that's part of the curriculum, so for example, here we are, we're looking at Carol challenges, Super Cleanup Carol. This is an actual exercise that we do in the course. And so when I create a shared version of it, I can't show the code. The reason for that being that we don't want to expose the solutions for exercises that are a part of the main curriculum. When a student is so I have the same share interface when I'm on a sandbox exercise. So if I create an exercise in the sandbox like we were looking at earlier, I can create a shareable URL for it. There I'll have the option for whether or not I want to display the code. So if I'm looking at, if I've modified an example, if I've modified an exercise from the curriculum slightly, it's probably not appropriate to be showing the code. But if I've written a novel program that doesn't really mirror anything in the course and I'm interested in showing off not only the product, but how I got there in the code that I wrote, that's totally something that you can do. And so the next thing we're going to look at is the Student Program Showcase. This is a feature that's super related to sharing. The Student Program Showcase is just a collection of shared exercises for a class. And instead of the student self-selecting to share it, you as the teacher select it to be shared. So basically, the Student Program Showcase is a collection of exercises from your class that you've deemed that you want to be shared and that you want to display in kind of a nice way. So let's go ahead and look at a class program showcase, or in how we would add something to a student program showcase first. So we're going to open up my Super Cleanup Carol again, and I'm going to click on Teacher. So I've got Run Code, Grading, Exercise Docs, Help, and More again, and I'm going to go ahead and click on Teacher. And here, now I can say Save Program to Class. And when I save it to class, it's going to be in the Student Program Showcase for that specific class. So that's how I do it. And then let's look at what a Student Program Showcase actually looks like. So this is the class program showcase for the CodeHS team class. We've got a really nice interface here for each exercise that we created. When I'm actually looking at the exercise, I can choose a file or a photo for it. So I can either screenshot the canvas, which is going to take a picture of what the canvas looks like at the end, or I can take a screenshot myself and upload it. And then we're going to get this really nice kind of tiled display of all of the exercises in the student program showcase. So a couple really cool use cases I've heard for this. One is something like parent-teacher night. So you've got all of your students' parents in the classroom. You can have the student program showcase open on a couple computers just so that they can see the type of work that their students are doing. All of the students in the class, as well as they can identify their own student by name and check out their work. Another very cool use case for this that I've heard of, Some teachers like to have bulletin boards of exceptional work, so maybe A pluses or 100s. You put them on the bulletin board to recognize specific students and inspire the rest of the students. This can act in much the same way. So you can use this to highlight really, really great programs that your students create. And so again, from any exercise that I'm at, I'm going to just click on the More tab and then Teacher, and then I can save the program to the class. Oh, and so one important part that I missed here is how do we actually access the Student Program Showcase? So let's go ahead and pull up a class roster page. I'm going to go ahead and click into one of my classes here. And if I want to access the Student Program Showcase, again, I'm going to be under the More tab, and then I'm going to select Student Program Showcase. So this is the roster page. It's the page that you see whenever you click on a class of yours on CodeHS. And then from the More menu here, I'm going to have Student Program Showcase, and that will take me to the Student Program Showcase as we were looking at it earlier. All right, so I wanted to pause for a moment to see if we had any questions so far.
So no questions right now, but I wanted to just highlight to everybody that I put in the chat the link to a help article that will help explain further how to use the Student Showcase. If you want to learn a little bit more about that, feel free to click on that link and you'll be able to learn a little bit more about it from our help articles.
Awesome, thank you, Alex. So we're going to dive right back in here. So the next thing that we're going to look at is CodeHS Create. So what is CodeHS Create? CodeHS Create is the suite of tools that we use to create content on the site, curricular content. So it's the tool that we use to make Introduction to Programming in JavaScript, Introduction to Programming in Python, AP Java, AP CSP, Cybersecurity, mobile apps. All of our courses were created in CodeHS Create. And we actually give you access to those tools as well so that you can create your own courses or your own curriculum and integrate it with CodeHS's suite of tools. So you can have it, you can create your own content and grade it in the grade book, look at the student work in fast grade mode, view reports on student progress. Really anything you can do with a CodeHS mainstream course, you can do with your own courses. So let's take a look at this. So when we talk about CodeHS Create, we're really just setting the stage here. So I mentioned that the webinar today is on some of our more nuanced tools, and CodeHS Create is the nuanced CodeHS tool. There's so much depth to it. I could sit here for a couple hours and talk your ears off about CodeHS Create and how to use it. And in fact, there have been times when we've done that. We've given webinars just on CodeHS Create. I encourage you to head to help.codehs.com and search webinars if you're interested in watching that. It's about 45 minutes just focusing on CodeHS Create, and it gives a great demo to kind of just get your feet under you, get kind of set up on and know what you're looking at and kind of what the workflow is for this tool. So when we're using CodeHS Create, we're generally doing two things. We're creating playlists or we're creating a custom course. So a very important thing for us to chat about today is what is the difference between a playlist and a custom course. The next part of CodeHS Create is the playlist, problem, and question banks. So we're going to chat about those as well. And then finally, we'll look at how the CodeHS Sandbox integrates with Create. Great. So what is a course on CodeHS? A course on CodeHS is something like Introduction to Computer Science and JavaScript. And so we have a screenshot here of a course, and a course is a course because of its structure. So the main thing that differentiates a course and a playlist is the structure of a course. And so at the highest level, we have a course, And then we have a number of modules. So programming with Carol is a module. Carol Challenges is a module. JavaScript and Graphics is a module. Each module is broken down into a number of lessons. So we can see 5 lessons here for JavaScript and Graphics. We've got 15 lessons in Carol, 1 lesson in Carol Challenges. And then each lesson breaks down into what we call activities. And an activity, kind of the bread and butter activities are a video, a quiz, an example, and an exercise. And we'll explore some other activity types that you can use in CodeHS Create later, because really the sky's the limit. But so when we're talking about courses, the main thing that we're talking about is that they're more structured. So we've got a course broken down into modules, broken down into lessons and activities. And that's the main thing. The next big difference is that custom courses have much more robust auto-grading than playlists do. So you might be familiar in CodeHS when you're working through an exercise, there's usually a check code button here, and there's a number of tests here that we can run our code through. And there are a couple different ways to do this in CodeHS Create. Actually, there are 3 different ways to do things similar to this in CodeHS Create. There's the unit test activity type, which is going to let you define a series of tests based on your solution code. We'll dive into that in a minute. And then there's the auto graders for playlists and the auto graders for courses. With playlist auto graders, what you're doing looks a lot like a unit test. So basically, you're going to take the output of your program and define some test inputs to run through it. So you'll take the student's program, put in some test inputs, and test whether or not it matches the expected output. And if it does, the student passes. If they don't pass. So basically what you're doing is you know that the program should output something given a certain input. So you're just testing that the student's program does that. When we're talking about a course, the auto graders are actually a lot more powerful. So when we're looking at a course and we're writing auto graders for it, we are writing code that's going to do 2 things. We're going to be able to take in the text of a student program and analyze it with our program. So we're just basically going to get the whole text of the program as a string, as well as a list of some important elements. So a list of things like a list of all the functions defined in it, a list of all the variables defined, and that's going to let us do really interesting things like count how many times variables are instantiated, or loops run, or loops exist. We get that same programmatic analysis of the output of the student's code. So really, we can do anything we want in terms of testing what the student writes and what their program outputs. So that's the other consideration when you're thinking about course versus playlist. Your other consideration is going to be, do I want more robust auto-grading that can do things like analyze both the text of the student's program as well as the output instead of just the output? So the next thing we're going to look at is playlists. And so we'll take actually a look at a real life playlist here. This playlist is called Coding Outside of CodeHS. For those of you that use Introduction to Computer Science in JavaScript, it's a really great tool for your students. I'm going to go ahead and paste it in the chat so you can enroll your students if you'd like. Basically, the idea of this playlist is I'm a student who can code in JavaScript on CodeHS. I can do the snowman activity. I can do the worm activity. How do I take that and make it happen outside of CodeHS? So how do I just open a text file on my desktop, or open a program on my desktop? What's even the workflow there? So this really starts at ground zero and says, let's download a text editor. Let's create these specific files. Here's how we create the relationships between the files. And then finally, let's open it up and see our program. So huge digression here, talking about the content of this playlist. But it's a really great playlist if you're an Intro.js teacher. So backing up, we're here to talk about the structure of a playlist. So a playlist is really just a lesson. If you remember, when we're looking at a course, we've got modules that are broken down into lessons, and a lesson is a collection of activities. So a playlist is really just a collection of activities. So these are really lightweight. They're for situations where you might not have kind of a path that you want to take students down. I like to use a playlist when I've just got one concept I want to teach or that I want to test, whereas I make a course when I have a couple different things that I want to teach. Really, anything from like 3 to a million things that I want to teach would be in a course. If I just have a couple things, I'll keep it in a playlist. And so for these reasons, playlists are really great for assessments, for challenges, and for remediation. A huge number of my teachers use the playlist creation tool to create a series of 2 or 3 challenge exercises that they use as a test. So they'll enroll their students in that playlist. They'll set up the access controls so that the playlist can only be used after a certain date. And then they'll say that's our midterm, and they'll just grade those exercises. And so this provides a lot of advantages. You have complete control over it. You know exactly what's being tested. It's exactly what you want to test. You can grade it however you like. It integrates right into the site with all the tools that you're going to use. And it gives you the ability to just ensure that you're never going to have a student who might have talked to one of last year's kids, or might have seen a solution posted somewhere on the internet. You're going to have assurance that it's your content, you made it, and it's ready for students. So, and then kind of great, or same thing for challenges and remediation. If I have a specific concept that I really want to work with a class, a playlist is a great way to do it. So let's say for loops. My class is really struggling with for loops. I can just create 4 or 5 exercises about for loops, have that be my for loop playlist, and show it to my students. So another thing I wanted to touch on, the thing that's in common between playlists and courses are activities. So at the most granular piece of a playlist and the most granular piece of a course is going to be the activities here. And so let's just talk very quickly about what we have access to, what the types of activities are. So first we've got exercise. This is what we know. An exercise is just a challenge for students. We have examples. An example is a fully written program that we show to students so they can play with it and break it. A quiz is a series of multiple choice questions. You define the questions, the answers, the correct choice, and then you get to put in a little tooltip for when students get it right or wrong. A unit test is a lot like an exercise, except we've got a series of sample inputs we're going to run through the student program so that we can test that it's working. A challenge is the same as an exercise. It's just denoted with a star. When students see it, it'll be a star instead of a pencil, so they know that it's a challenge exercise. Notes is just text. A resource links to an external destination and puts it in an iframe so that you can host a website inside CodeHS. Not host a website inside CodeHS, but view a website inside CodeHS. A video is a video, and a free response is going to give students just a text editor with no code linting. So it's not going to say you forgot your semicolons or you forgot to say var. It's just going to be a blank slate that they can write in. So it's really good for kind of your traditional free response questions. The last thing we're going to look at with Create is how the sandbox works with Create. So I'm just going to open my sandbox and show you this here in the interest of time. I've got my Portland PD Workshop class sandbox open. And let's say I really like one of these exercises and I want to add it to a playlist so that my other students can use it. So I've navigated to the sandbox, and I can do this from my sandbox. So here we've got all of my exercises, or my class sandbox. So here we've got all of my students' exercises. So I can use this if I create something I really like in the sandbox, or if my students create something that I want my other students to create. So let's see what this does. I'm just going to go ahead and pick Silly Stoplight, and I'm going to add it to my Carol Worlds playlist. And so now it's going to take me to the playlist editor for my Carol Worlds playlist, and I'm going to be able to see that sandbox exercise has been added to my playlist. So I can see Silly Stoplight is now on the list here. And my code for Silly Stoplight is listed as the solution code. So this is like the teacher answer key. And so basically what this means is that's kind of what my students are trying to achieve. And I can see it here in the solution code. And generally, you'll probably recognize this. This is kind of how we start all of our JavaScript and graphics exercises, is by defining an empty start function. And now we've got an exercise. When I open this up, students are going to see only their starter code, which is that start function, and then they're going to be able to attempt to solve the exercise. And the other nice part is that that solution code is what runs when you hit this run demo. So I'm not sure that this program actually does anything because I wrote it many, many years ago, but if I hit this run, oh, there it goes. It's a silly stoplight. So all I had to do was put this as the solution code. And now when I hit the demo button, it's going to give me this great canvas so I can see what I need to do. My students can see what they need to do. And they just start with a blank slate here. And so you might use that for a couple of reasons. If a student creates something really cool that you want your other students to emulate, or you create something and you're like, hey, I'd like to challenge my students to make this. In addition to that Canvas output we saw, we can also just save an exercise description. So here I can write, solve the challenge, whatever it's going to be, create a stoplight that shows wild, create a stoplight from Alice in Wonderland or something like that. And then that's what students will see on the left-hand side here. And then the first time they load the exercise, they'll get that nice pop-up with the instructions right there. So really, it looks professional. It looks like the rest of the material on CodeHS immediately. So here we're just looking at how he did that. Do we have any questions on CodeHS Create? I know we're running up on our end time here, so we're going to just fly through the last portion of academic integrity. So if you have any questions, I think now is probably the right time to ask them. Okay, great. So Alex will be keeping an eye on the Q&A, and he's going to let me know if anybody writes in there. So if you're typing, don't worry, we're going to get to that question that you're writing right in a moment. But let's move on in case anybody is really pressed for time. So the next subject and the final subject we're going to talk about is academic integrity. So the academic integrity, and we're going to add a fourth one to this, which is what we discussed at the beginning. How do we turn on copy-paste prevention? So we're going to look at three things: cheat detection, time tracking, and code history. So at any time on CodeHS, you have access to the cheat detection dashboard. The way that you're going to get there is you're going to go to your toolbox and then select View Full Toolbox in the bottom right-hand side. So just a reminder, whenever I'm on the site, the toolbox is right here at the top. I'm going to click View Full Toolbox. And then I'm going to click on cheat detection right here under code review. Let me back up in case that was too fast. Got cheat detection right here under code review. And so this is going to give me a number of tools that I can use for cheat detection. And so I just need to demo something really quickly. At the heart of cheat detection is code history. Oh, this is not what I wanted open. Great, this is. So whenever a student hits run code, CodeHS saves what their code looks like at that moment in time. And in our trusty more tab, which we've looked at a couple times already today, we're going to have an item that says history. And here we're going to be able to see what my code looked like every single time I hit run code. And so we can rewind my code to any point in its history. We can go back to the very beginning and see what's the very first thing Will did and how did he move from there? And see that. So this is a great example. This is an example of kind of the organic development process on CodeHS. I like to call it run code driven development. So the very first thing I wrote was if ball's not present, move. Most of us will recognize this as kind of a run to wall function. Carol should just keep moving till she reaches the wall. But I've got a bug. I wrote ball's not present, but the command is really no balls present. So that was the very first change I made because I hit run code. I got the feedback that this isn't a valid command. And then when I go to my history tab, and then I changed it, and I can see that change reflected in my history tab. So as you can probably tell, this is a really powerful tool to look into a student's thought process as they solve an exercise on CodeHS. It's going to show me how they set out to solve the problem, each step that they took along the way. And this makes it very easy for me to define or to discover academic integrity violations. So if I see that this code has gone from here, so we've just got 6 lines of code, and then the next thing is that, well, I know that there was likely a copy paste that took place. So let's look at, so this is a really useful tool for discovering academic integrity violations on the individual level. And so let's look at how we can kind of scale this and use this tool on a class basis. So you may have noticed on the cheat detection dashboard, we have an item called time tracking. So this is a really cool tool. It's going to give us a table with every student and every exercise. And then the cell is going to be how many times that student hit the run code button and how long it took them from starting the program until getting it to pass. And so you know your classes best. You know kind of how long things should take students, how they work relative to one another. So looking at this data, you can tell where the outliers are, who performed really well on a certain program that it might be as part of a concept that they struggled with or a lesson that they struggled with. So this is going to, what I do when I'm looking at time tracking, I'm looking for outliers. So I can see that Zach, this took him 112 tries in 37 minutes. Zach's a professional programmer, so I know that that's really likely a very honest reflection of what it takes to do that activity. And so let me back up a moment for context. This is your first Carol program. It's not a hard program. It takes 5 minutes to solve. Zach has demoed it hundreds and hundreds of times, so that's why this looks the way it does. But basically what I'm going to see is I'm going to look and say, well, it took Andy 2 tries, and he did it so fast that we didn't even register that he had started it. And I know my competent programmer, Zach, it really took him a while, and he really had to try hard to get this. So what's going on here? What I can do then is click on that cell, open up Andy's exercise, get into the code history tab, and start investigating that for clues that there were some academic integrity violations. And again, what that's going to look like is things kind of going from 0 to 60 very quickly. So we've got nothing, and then all of a sudden we've got everything. That's a copy paste. Or you might see, you know, the program starts off like this and the student is changing function names and changing variable names, but not really making any changes to things that would affect the execution of the program. That's kind of a good sign that they're trying to get away with cheating as well. And so we looked at time tracking, we looked at code history, we looked at the cheat detection, and we're going to address our question now. So I'm going to go ahead and open up one of my classes. I'm going to go to my sections. I'm going to go back to my trusty Portland PD workshop class. And so here I am on my roster page. I've clicked into my class. I'm on the roster page. And I'm going to click on the gear icon here for settings. And so anytime you're wondering, how do I do something related to a class, a really good place to check is on the class settings page, because we make it pretty easy to get to everything from here. So I'm on my class settings page. So we have some nice things like show blocks. We're not going to go into too deep about everything, but if I scroll down towards the bottom, I've got copy paste prevention. And this is going to make it so that nobody in that class can copy and paste while they're using the CodeHS editor. And so it's not completely perfect. There are tricks you can do and programs you can do to force your browser or your computer to copy paste, but it's like a 99% solution. It's a really great way to prevent students from pasting. And I wanted to highlight that question that was asked at the beginning of the webinar because I thought it framed it in a really good way. My major concern is trying to set things up where students can be tested where copy and paste is disabled. So that identifies a really cool use case for this, which is it's the day of the midterm, I'm going to turn off copy paste, and then I can turn it back on afterwards. But the idea there is that sometimes copy and pasting is inbounds collaboration. When we're working as programmers, we're often working collaboratively. We stand on the shoulders of giants. We use libraries and programming languages and compilers that are written by other people. And sometimes we're programming collaboratively and we have the need to copy paste. Sometimes even I might want to go back to an exercise that I wrote in the past and pick up a really useful helper function so that I don't have to rewrite it. So in general, we like to have copy and paste on for students, but for situations like assessment, or if you just feel like you've lost control of academic integrity in your classroom, copy paste prevention is a really great way to do that. So I just wanted to open it up now for the Q&A to see if we have any questions about academic integrity. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any questions. In the case that you do have a question and you're not able to enter it, you can definitely feel free to reach out to myself or Alex. I'm will@codehs.com and Alex is alex@codehs.com. We love helping teachers. It's what we're good at. So if you have a question about anything that you saw today, definitely don't hesitate to reach out. All right, so sorry, my computer was frozen there for a moment. Our next webinar is in October, so we're starting up a new webinar series in October that we've just announced. The webinar is Exploring the Course Catalog, and it's, I have the date here, somebody sending me the date, October 4th, 1 p.m. Pacific. So October 4th, 1 p.m. Pacific is our next webinar, and that's Exploring the Course Catalog. So we're going to talk all about the different courses on CodeHS and how you can use them in your classroom. So feel free to show up to that one. One more thing we always get, and that's led by the curriculum team. So this is your customer success team, and that'll be the curriculum team. So a great time to hop on if you've ever wanted to learn more about the CodeHS curriculum or get a little insight into why the curriculum team does what they do and how they do it. So one important note, everybody always asks this, the slides will be going out, a recording of the webinar will be going out. They're going to be hosted on the CodeHS knowledge base, so you'll see them in your email inbox, and they'll be on the site where you can always access it. All right, thank you so much to everybody that joined us today. We appreciate you taking the time to stop by and learn a little bit about CodeHS. As always, if you have any questions, you can feel free to send them my way, send them Alex's way, or just reach out to whoever your contact at CodeHS may be. All right, thank you so much for joining us today, and that's it. Have a great rest of the week.